Everyone laughed when the CEO walked into the ballroom with her date. It wasn't a quiet chuckle or a polite whisper behind manicured hands. It was open, bold, unapologetic. The kind of laughter that slices through crystal chandeliers and violin music, the kind that assumes it already knows the whole story. Eva Laurent, CEO of Laurent Global Technologies, did not flinch. She had faced hostile boardrooms, ruthless competitors, and a media storm that once tried to bury her company in a single news cycle. She was known for her composure, for her precision, for never ever making a public misstep. Yet tonight, as cameras flashed at the wedding of the year, people stared not at her designer gown or diamond earrings, but at the man beside her. He wore a simple navy suit, slightly outdated cut, polished but not expensive shoes. His hair was neatly trimmed, his posture humble but steady, and in his hand he carried a small gift wrapped in brown paper instead of a luxury boutique bag. Daniel Reyes, single father, school maintenance supervisor, part-time night student, and apparently the CEO's date. The whispers spread like wildfire. Is that her driver? Is this a joke? She could have any billionaire in this room. Why would she bring him here? Ava heard every word. She kept walking. Daniel felt them too. He had grown used to certain looks, the kind that measured a man's worth by the brand of his watch. He didn't own a watch worth measuring. His entire focus had been raising his 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, after his wife passed away 3 years ago. Grief had rearranged his world. Love had rebuilt it. When Ava asked him to attend the wedding of her godson, the son of one of the wealthiest families in the city, Daniel had hesitated. "You're sure?" He had asked quietly over coffee 2 weeks earlier. She had smiled at him then. Not the corporate smile that graced magazine covers, a real one. "I don't invite people I'm unsure about." They had met a year ago under circumstances that no one in that ballroom knew. Laurent Global had sponsored a community STEM program at Sophia's public school. Ava had attended without press, without announcement. She believed in seeing impact firsthand. That afternoon, a shy little girl had stood up during a robotics presentation and confidently explained how she rebuilt a broken motor using parts salvaged from discarded equipment. "That's my dad's idea," Sophia had said proudly. "He says broken things can still work better than before." After the event, Ava sought out the father who inspired that mindset. Daniel had been fixing a faulty stage light when she approached him. He hadn't recognized her immediately. He spoke to her like she was any other visitor, respectful but unpolished, honest. Over time, conversations became coffee. Coffee became friendship. Friendship quietly deepened into something neither of them rushed to define. Back in the ballroom, the bride and groom were making their rounds. The groom, Ethan Caldwell, heir to the Caldwell estate, was shaking hands with investors and political figures. His tuxedo was custom-tailored, his cufflinks engraved with family insignia. When Ethan's eyes landed on Ava, he smiled warmly and began walking toward her. But then he noticed Daniel. There was a flicker of confusion in his expression, a brief scan, assessment, judgment. The guests nearby leaned in, anticipating awkward introductions. "Ava," Ethan greeted, air kissing her cheek. "You look stunning, as always." His gaze shifted to Daniel. "And you are?" Daniel extended his hand. "Daniel Reyes, congratulations. It's a beautiful ceremony." Ethan glanced at Daniel's hand for a second too long before shaking it. Then it happened. From across the ballroom, one of Ethan's college friends, slightly drunk, slightly louder than appropriate, called out, "Careful, Ethan. That guy looks like he parked the cars." Laughter erupted again. Ava's jaw tightened. Daniel slowly withdrew his hand. Before Ava could respond, Ethan did something unexpected. He looked directly at Daniel, really looked at him. His expression changed, his posture straightened, and then, in a voice that carried through the entire room, he said one word: "Boss." Silence dropped like shattered glass. The same guests who had been laughing froze mid-smirk. Daniel blinked. "Excuse me?" Ethan gave a short, almost disbelieving laugh of his own, but this time it wasn't mocking. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Daniel studied his face. Memories flickered. A dusty auto shop 15 years ago. A teenage boy with grease on his hands and fear in his eyes. A scholarship rejection letter. A father who had just lost his job. Ethan continued, voice steady but emotional. "You worked at Morales Auto Repair after high school. I was 17. My dad's company had just collapsed during the recession. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone we couldn't afford repairs. I tried to fix my car myself. Made it worse." A murmur spread through the crowd. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "You stayed late 3 nights in a row," Ethan said. "You never charged me. You told my father that real wealth isn't money, it's integrity. You said take care of your name and your people, the rest rebuilds." The ballroom was utterly silent now. "My father rebuilt," Ethan continued. "Caldwell Industries came back stronger. And I built my life on what you said." He swallowed. "You were the first person who treated me like I wasn't a failure." Ethan took a step back, straightened fully, and nodded with deep respect. "Boss." The word no longer sounded casual, it sounded earned. Ava watched Daniel carefully. He wasn't basking in the attention. He wasn't defensive. He simply looked humbled. "I was just doing my job," Daniel replied quietly. "No," Ethan said. "You were doing more than that." The shift in the room was palpable. The same guests who had judged him minutes earlier now avoided his eyes. But the story wasn't over. One of the board members from Laurent Global, who had always doubted Ava's soft approach to leadership, approached cautiously. "Ava," he said, forcing a smile, "you never mentioned your date was connected." Ava's expression sharpened. "He's not here because he's connected," she said calmly. "He's here because he's kind, because he's consistent, because when no one was watching, he showed up for people." She turned to Daniel, "And because Sophia adores him." A few guests looked confused. "Sophia?" someone whispered. "My daughter," Daniel said softly. The board member looked surprised. "You're a father?" Daniel nodded. "Single dad," Ava added, "raising a future engineer." The weight of that statement settled. In a room full of generational wealth and inherited influence, the most powerful presence was a man who fixed broken machines by day and read bedtime stories by night. Later that evening, while the dance floor filled and the orchestra played, Ethan approached Daniel privately. "There's something else," Ethan said. "When my father recovered, he tried to find you. Morales Auto had closed. You had left." Daniel's face dimmed slightly. "My wife got sick. We moved closer to the hospital." "I'm sorry," Ethan said sincerely. Daniel nodded once. "Me too." Ethan hesitated. "I'd like to fund a scholarship at the public school you work at, in your name, for kids who rebuild broken things." Daniel shook his head immediately. "Don't put my name on it." Ethan smiled knowingly. "Then I'll put Sophia's." Daniel's eyes softened. Across the room, Ava watched them, pride swelling quietly in her chest. She hadn't brought Daniel to prove a point. She had brought him because he reminded her who she was before titles and headlines. Because when she confided in him about board pressure or market downturns, he didn't speak in stock valuations. He spoke in values. "You don't build companies," he once told her. "You build people. Companies follow." That advice had led her to restructure Laurent Global's mentorship programs. Productivity increased. Employee retention soared. But more importantly, culture changed near the end of the night as guests prepared to leave. The same drunk college friend who had mocked Daniel earlier approached sheepishly. "Hey, man," he muttered. "Didn't know you were, you know." Daniel looked at him calmly. "I'm just me." The man nodded awkwardly and walked away. Ava slipped her hand into Daniel's as they stepped outside into the cool night air. "You okay?" she asked. Daniel smiled slightly. "I've been underestimated before." She laughed softly. "I know." He looked at her, more serious now. "Why did you really bring me tonight?" She didn't hesitate. "Because I'm tired of rooms that measure worth by noise. I wanted someone who understands quiet strength. He squeezed her hand gently. Inside the ballroom, conversations had shifted, not about stocks, not about influence, but about impact. Weeks later, headlines wouldn't mention the laughter. They would mention the scholarship fund. They would mention Laurent Global's new community partnership initiative inspired by an unnamed educator. They would never know that the turning point of the evening was a single word: boss. The truth is, the world often laughs at what it doesn't understand. It measures success in visible currency, titles, tailored suits, spotlight moments. But real leadership is often invisible. It's the mechanic who stays late so a scared teenager doesn't lose hope. It's the single father who rebuilds engines and bedtime dreams. It's the CEO who chooses character over image. Everyone laughed at the CEO's date until they realized they were standing in the presence of the man who had quietly built the foundation beneath their success. And in the end, the most powerful person in the room wasn't the one with the highest net worth. It was the one who never needed recognition to make a difference. Sometimes the loudest respect comes from a single word: boss.